Hello everyone, it's me once again back with more Stellaris opinions. 1.6 has dropped and it's had some nice features to add, and we've got ourselves some lovely new portraits and whatnot for free, which is always cool. Greater deal of customization, but there's one factor in that I don't like, and that's the rebalance of the crisis events. Now, before we go any further, I should say that I have beaten and can beat all the crisis events. I've beaten the Unbidian, I've beaten the Scourge, and I've beaten the War in Heaven. The AI Rebellion still has never spawned, and the patch notes make clear that they don't seem to have changed the balance values to have that spawn. I've been trying to stack the game in order to get the AI Rebellion, but it's still not working, so that's a completely different issue. So we'll just leave that at that. But my problem is that their rebalance of these events has ramped them up. They have doubled the initial fleet sizes for crisis fleets and quadrupled their overall fleet power, so you can now expect millions of fleet power for these crises. And I don't like this because it further focuses the game onto one single aspect, and that is the fleet. In previous versions, you would expect to have a gigantic fleet ready by the time the crisis events show up. About 100k, it's not that difficult to do, but it did require you to pretty much focus on that fleet output. I've had many situations where I've looked at my minerals and gone, I could build a Dyson sphere. I don't need a Dyson sphere. I'd like to have one, but it would be more efficient to invest this back into the fleet. You look at your habitat stations and you go, what am I going to do with these habitat stations? Am I going to build them up so that they've all got agricultural centres on there and leisure districts because that would be cool and thematic for my stations? No, I'm going to pump them full of energy or mineral modules so that I can upgrade the fleet. Everything in the game is focused on the fleet. And from my perspective, I want to role-play my empire. If I'm playing my isolationist empire, then I want to sit in my area, build up my own empire, and only respond to external threats. So if someone decides to attack me, I'll go to war with them. I won't take any of their planets because I'm just here to defend my borders, even though I could. I'm not going to. If someone decides to build a sentry array, I might go out and fight them to stop that from happening because I don't want them prying into my people's space. That's my space. You don't look in there. That's the sort of thing that I want to do. I want to role play. But the game is very much focused on the fleet, and it feels like I am punished for not focusing on the fleet. And some people are probably going to take that opinion as like, well, just get good at the game. Get good at the game. I don't need to get good at the game because I win. I win those games really easily by just focusing on the fleet, and I don't want to. But the problem is when that crisis event rolls around, if you don't have the fleet, that is it. There is no other option but having the fleet. So I've taken to turning the crisis fence off, and thankfully the War in Heaven doesn't count, so I can keep that, which is great because that's probably the most interesting event, although even that is kind of dull right now. It really depends on how things shake up, but it can be boring or it can be very exciting. War in Heaven is much better than the other ones. So if you go with a role-playing situation, say I want to be a small empire, I want to defend my space but I don't want to expand because I'm playing them thematically, I've only got a small fleet, the game is like, here comes a massive crisis fleet, I've got no tactical options against to do anything with that. I can't fight back, the AI can't be coordinated with because they're idiots and they're useless, and so the game pretty much just ends there. And it's not, like I said, it's not the problem that I can't get the fleet up, it's that I have to. That is the only viable tactic in the game. And it does make it somewhat dull because AI empires will never attack you if you go for fleet focus, because your fleet will always be strong enough that even on higher difficulty settings, the AI is not going to be aggressive against you. They're going to go, my fleet is 20k strong, but yours is 50k, I'm not going to attack you because I will lose. They have no tactical options against you having the biggest fleet. And it happens all the time. In the previous version of this game, I was winning a war in heaven, beating the unbeaten with my 120k fleet. Without hitting my fleet cap, I could still go higher, I could still build more ships, but what's the point? There was no need. All they've done in improving the crisis fleets by building them up more is making me build more ships. And it doesn't make the combat any more enjoyable. It doesn't make me have to think of, alternate tactics. It just means that I've got to have more ships. I've got to have more focus. And maybe I was building a sentry array and dicking around and putting my minerals into superfluous buildings because I felt like it. Now I'm going to go, well, I don't need a 500 plus monthly surplus on food. I'll just turn that into minerals. I'll turn that into minerals and energy. And I can support an even bigger fleet, and that's it. So this is a real problem. It's something that bothers me. A lot of people seem to be very excited about this, but for me, if you want to make something more difficult, you really need to change it up so that different tactics and different ways of thinking come into play, rather than just it's the same as everything else. It's just the numbers are bigger. Crisis events are just bigger numbers. The tactics are the same. Everything is the same. And the fleet is king. Where's my science? What are my scientists doing throughout this? You go into a sci-fi movie, the scientists usually come up with some clever solution which gives you an edge or something like that. It's just, it's terrible. And I want to talk about improvements that I would make to the crisis events to make them more interesting. But first, I'm going to go into what I would do if I was designing a new crisis. And what I'd like to suggest is a new crisis of a von Neumann wave. So for you who don't know what a von Neumann wave is, it's named after mathematician John von Neumann, and it's basically a grey goo scenario. Nanites. Self-replicating nanites. So what we would do is we'd introduce a new dangerous technology to the game. One which addresses a problem which I've talked about in my doom stacking video, which was the inability to replace and repair your fleets in any sort of time to make a response if you lose a fleet. Basically you'd build nano forges somewhere in your empire. Your AIs would also have them, and you've got sort of levels of how high you want to take those nanite forges. So a basic nanite forge would increase ship build speed and reduce ship build cost throughout the empire. That's its modifier. A level 2 nanite forge might allow you to build 2 ships at once in that system. And going up to a level 3 nanite forge, you can really build ships really fast. You can build multiple ones at once. It gives you a super edge in building up your fleet really quickly, but it comes with the caveat that the nanite forge at that level might malfunction and cause a grey goo scenario, or a von Neumann wave, which is the nanites come out, they consume all the materials in the solar system, and then they start to spread out from there, consuming and growing as they go. Now what I do is I would have it so you get this catastrophic event, and the initial system, which is being attacked by the nanites, becomes sealed by an event which would be the nanite forges have exploded and there are nanites spread out in a thin cloud throughout the system, which makes it impossible for any ships to go into that system. Any ships that were already in the system when it went off are going to be heavily damaged or destroyed, because this is a catastrophic, obviously bad thing that's going on. And any ships that come in, because the nanites are so small and you obviously can't see them, they're going to start attacking the ship's hulls in an attempt to replicate when they come into the system. And so you can't send your war fleet in there to go, oh shit, crisis event started, I'm going to rush it. So that prevents you from simply rushing the nanite event. It would allow it to build some steam. But as the nanites form these clumps, they go through the system and they eat any research bases, they eat any asteroids, they'll eat entire planets, so that the systems that they consume are just empty. It's just a sun in an empty star system. But furthermore, they then spread out from there in several clumps at a sub-warp speed. So they're not moving at warp. They're moving relatively slowly out of the system, and they just pick random star systems anywhere in the galaxy and they move there slowly. The range of this is not limited. They've got their own special drive so that they can basically have infinite range. But once they're locked onto that, it might take them like a year to get to their destination because it's so slow. But they could crop up anywhere in the galaxy and then immediately start eating. When they arrive in a star system, they begin to eat asteroids, planets, etc., etc., and replicate. And as they eat other things, they grow, but they don't only grow, they become more complicated. So if they eat some minerals, like an asteroid is in the system and it's got 2 minerals on it, when they eat the minerals, they gain a larger boost in their fleet size. It becomes bigger from those minerals. If they eat something that's got physics research on it, then they develop a random technology, and you could have a list of technologies for that particular fleet to consume and grow and gain. So engineering would give them more weapons, physics might give them shields or something like that, and this means that the waves as they go out, they're not only growing and consuming planets, they're also changing, they're becoming new. And that's one of the problems that I had with both the Praetorians and the Unbidden, is that they have an obvious hard counter, and you just build your ships to counter them, and that's really easy. One fleet does it all, whereas these guys, I want them to be able to change, so that the nanites that headed north and hit this one station, they've eaten a lot of research stations, and they've become like so scientifically advanced, their weapons are more powerful, they've got longer range, etc., etc. Whereas the ones that have gone south have hit a lot of minerals, they've hit certain strategic resources which are going to give them different buffs, so now they're really got a really tanky high armor fleet, and that sort of thing changes them. When they attack a fleet in combat, any ships that they destroy, they have a chance of integrating technology from those fleets that they attack and destroy and consume, which further enhances them. So they sort of start weak and start to build as they go. That's the sort of idea here. And I just really like that idea. But furthermore, I want there to be a other solutions and other interactions with these crisis events. If I'm a scientific empire and I'm a scientific powerhouse, why don't my researchers do anything? Why can't I call upon the greatest minds in the galaxy who happen to live within my materialist empire? What are they doing? They're sitting on their butts. It's like, well, I'm going to research new transgenic crops, I think, while our worlds are consumed by this ravening horde. No, give them sort of things, special research projects, a variety of different ones that I can choose between them. So we know that the origin system for the von Neumann wave, or the nanites, is sealed by the fact that the nanite cloud in there is damaging any ships that go in there. But I can research a special type of hull plating which makes me more resistant to nanites, and I can use that on my fleet ships to make them more resistant to nanites. Maybe it lowers their armor, and that's the sacrifice that I have to do, and it could be something like they can't integrate weapons or armor or technologies from my ships if I have this plating on my warships, but if I put it on my science ship, it can go into that nanite origin world. It can scan it and get a special project which will help me further my cause. Namely, it will do something like, say, give me a research project which will allow me to upload new programming into the nanite clouds so that they attack one another. And that could really help me deal with the crisis event if it started to snowball. But this would also have the chance that if one nanite swarm sort of became dominant and consumed all the other nanite swarms, then it would become a super swarm, and you would be really stuck in the situation where you've sure, you've wiped out all the other nanites fleets, but this is now one mega fleet, and it is become quite powerful. So you've also got, while you've managed to make them fight one another, you want to also get in there to make sure that no one swarm becomes dominant, that sort of thing. So it's got like these checks and balances going on there, which I think would be also quite cool. One thing that I should mention, of course, is the idea that ships' drives and things like sentient AIs, sentient AI fleet computers for your ships, those sort of components, when they get consumed and integrated into the nanite swarms, when they eat research bases, there's sort of a progress bar for them where they become sentient. And once they become sentient, they no longer just randomly move around and consume planets. They start to purposely target things. Their drives improve so that they're no longer slow-moving sublight things. Again, it's about taking a threat which was small and building it up as it goes so that it becomes worse and worse and worse. And then I also want to have just something cool to do with my ascendancies, and that is, if I'm a materialist empire and I go full synthetic evolution and become AIs, and the nanite swarms have unified and become sentient, there is a chance that I can go to them and say, let's merge our programming and integrate with the nanite swarm so that they become a part of my empire. But then immediately every other empire in the galaxy automatically combines into a threat group and goes to war against me. That sort of thing. I think that this sort of stuff would be really cool, and that's just like my ideas for how I would handle my own custom crisis event. And that's the sort of thing that I want. The scientists are active. They've got things to do during the events. They've got a variety of different research projects that you can work on to say, maybe I want to reprogram the nanites to fight amongst themselves, but if I do that, then I've got a problem with maybe I get a super swarm. There's also sort of time limits on them, like if a nanite swarm becomes sentient, then I can no longer reprogram them. Things like that. Just these interactions between them integrating different technologies, they become a different threat. They don't have a direct hard counter to make them trivial and easy. That's the sort of thing that I would like to see happen in game, and it's just something that is not happening, and it's not something that we're seeing right now. And yeah, because the current events, the crisis events, they don't feel like events. They don't feel like this epic struggle of the galaxy against different things. That's one of the reasons that my favorite crisis, it's not really it doesn't count as a crisis, but it's my favorite one, is the War in Heaven, because it's sort of got a story element and you've got this grand combat and multiple fleets, and like I've had terrible wars in Heaven where I've been so dominant that I just won and it was really easy, but I've had ones where the War in Heaven has started a bit earlier, and so my fleet is strong and could probably take any other fleet in the galaxy, but the other fleets are strong enough to damage me, and because so many of us are, because the entire galaxy is at war, there's an excellent chance that if I take damage fighting that big fleet, then that other big fleet, which is really close by, could also jump into the system and just wipe me out. And so it became a lot more tactical about where I place things. But that's only ever happened once. My other wars in Heaven tend to be a bit lackluster because, again, you have the biggest fleet, you jump in, you destroy the AI fleet, and they never replace their ships. That's something that really bothers me, is they're trying to make these events huge, and I think that's the main reason that they've gone with, we're giving them 2 million fleet points, because we don't want the player to be the only civilization. We don't want one civilization to fight them and that's it. We want it to be a galaxy-wide event so that the galaxy has to come together against this crisis which threatens all of them. But it doesn't work like that because the AI is too stupid to fight back. They don't coordinate. You'll see them go, well, if we combined our fleets we could maybe attack the portal, but they go, well, that guy's got 60k worth of ships and I've only got 50k, and my allies only got 50k, and my other allies only got 50k, and you go, well, that adds up to 150. You'd win this fight, but you'd all have to go in together, but they don't, and you've got no way of directing them. So That's what I'm thinking about on these events. I want them to be events. I want them to have multiple phases. I want to involve my scientists. I want there to be sort of more of a story. You know, I want to be able to rally the galaxy against them. I want them to be more interesting than, did you build enough ships before they arrived? No, you've lost. Did you build enough ships before they arrived? Yes. Okay, then this is easy. You didn't have you've got enough ships. Well done, you've won. And that's the problem. You just focus on your fleets. It stops there from being this role-playing element in the game, because you've got to focus on the fleets, and the crisis event will punish you if you don't have fleet power. The fleet combat is boring and not tactical at all. It's just so frustrating. It's frustrating. And yeah, so that's my opinion on these things. I'd love to see more stuff. I just, like, if you could even just improve the events so that, like, I could build dimensional jammers or something. If I can get a research vessel to scan the portal, then that science ship scans the portal and gives me the chance to research a technology that I've got to race to research to create these things, like a dimensional jammer, which is sort of an anti-dimensional anchor, which I can stick in my space, that creates sort of a bubble which is like a bit and a weaker when they come into this section of the space, and they've got to destroy it, and they're all going to try and rush in and destroy that dimensional anchor, but I'm going to want to push them back and destroy their dimensional anchor so that I can replace them with a jammer or something like that, and this is a back and forth, and just more to do, more than just having the big fleet and then slapping them into one another. It's probably not going to happen anytime soon, because we would need an overhaul of fleet combat to make it more tactical. Or we would need maybe other means of dealing with large-scale military threats other than just having the biggest fleet in the game. I'm expecting the next major expansion to perhaps focus on external diplomacy, because we've had internal politics. So external politics, it makes sense to me that that would be the next one. I'm hoping that they're going to expand this in a way that lets me mess with other empires and stuff, so that I can roleplay sections. I can send spies and saboteurs to mess with different alliances and whatnot. So if there's a guy that I would like to invade, but he's got 3 defense pact allies that I don't want to have to deal with, then I could destabilize that alliance and things like that, and he'd have counter spies, so that I could play a smaller empire, roleplay them, because that's what I really want. I want to have a small empire, and I want to be able to roleplay them so that I'm like not the power on the throne, but the power behind the throne sort of situations. Things like that, because that variation makes it more interesting, and it's just not there yet. Right now, regardless of what civilization I'm playing, xenophobic isolationists got to focus on making a big fleet. My egalitarian federation builders got to focus on making a big fleet. My spiritual zealots, they've got to focus on making a big fleet, because the game feels like it is punishing me for trying to play differently and playing the same, what feels like the same game each and every time with the same strategy, because that is the only strategy that is valid. That's making the game boring, and I'm not wanting to play it. So that's my 2 cents on this. If you've got something that you would like to say about endgame crises, what you think about them, etc., please leave a comment. The channel is tiny, as I've said. I'd like to hear back from you. I will certainly read any comments that come my way, and it might give me food for thought. It might give me something where I can change my opinion based on an excellent point that someone might bring up. Thank you for listening.